Bismillah. In the story that the Quran gives us about the first human being, the first consciousness, was Adam. And Adam was shown everything, and he named everything. Now, Fakhruddin al-Razi, one of our great metaphysicians, said that what he was able to do was to see the universal in the particular. And abstraction is the ability of the human mind to see one out of many, universes, right. One out of many. And so the human mind was created purposely to see the one out of many, because ultimately it just see the one God out of the many variants of God's creation. And so the abstraction is the great gift of the human mind, that we can abstract, that we can, in Arabic, tajrid means literally to make naked, to denude, and to get to the essence of a thing. And this is why a human being can categorize things. If I say to somebody, could you get me a glass? They go to the kitchen. I don't have to say which glass, in some kind of nominalistic idea that every single glass is unique. Yeah. No, he has the universal concept of glass, which enables us to talk. So we're constantly talking with abstraction. There's no way we could speak or communicate without abstraction. So those abstractions are a gift from God. And it was designed for the ultimate abstraction, which is to see the reality behind the multiplicity, which is one. And that's why we're called muwahidun, those who make one. That's what the Muslims are. They are those who make one. They make God one in their understanding. Because there are others that give God multiplicity or deny God and then make the universe a God. Because there's no such thing as an atheist. If somebody says, I don't believe in God, they have to believe in the universe. Right, they have to believe in materialism. So what they're doing is they're giving the attributes of God to other than God. And that's the essence of shirk in our tradition, which is the worst sin, which is to associate with God what cannot be associated with God.
Okay, so that would seem to indicate a nominalism where the human mind abstracts the ideas of the universal from the particulars, but there's no self-existing universal.
Yeah, you get into big debates. And these are metaphysical problems, and obviously Hume and his ilk completely dismiss them as just a waste of time. But there is an idea of what are called source forms or archetypes, that everything is coming out of these source forms, and that's how we recognize them in this world.
It's a very different way to conceptualize
it. So there is this idea. Muslims tend to be realist in the traditional sense of that word, not the modern sense of it. So we're not idealists, not like Berkeley's idea of the world, where it's just a perception.
In the mind of God, no, it's real.
No, there are real things, but then there are also things that have an extra mental existence,
Okay, well that's different than if we have the ability to abstract something, that's something we're creating as opposed to
like
something...
numbers. Do numbers exist?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so numbers are pure abstractions.
Right.
I mean, there's no number in the world. It's the mind that gives the world number. Right. Avicenna has a whole section about that.
Right, but is that something that we're inferring by language, and therefore it's kind of a fictionalism to have a universal, or is there some fundamental universal perhaps that God created, or some relationship with God that we're then able to perceive?
Yeah, and I think these are the debates that the metaphysicians have, and it's not a dogmatic view in the Islamic tradition, so there's no fixed dogmatism on that.
How about the relationship between God and time, which to me is one of the deep probes of both time and God? And the question is God, clearly God has no beginning and no end, but that can be understood in two different ways. One is that time is real and God is in time, but God never had a beginning and never had an end, and then will never have an end. So it's an everlasting situation.
Right.
Or is God not in time? That time is something that God created and therefore is not in time, and has some sort of a changeless time out of not in existence, and is eternal in the sense of having no participation in time. There's no difference in terms of God always being there, but a very deep difference in terms of the nature of God and how we relate to God.
Sure. So I think that in the Islamic tradition, God is creator of time, that God, I think Muslims would adhere to the Aristotelian idea that time is the measurement of motion. And so God has no motion. God is not, there's no space that God moves in. God is infinite. Yeah. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, do not reflect on the infinity of God, but rather reflect on God's attributes. Because like Cantor, who worked on actual infinities, you can go mad thinking about infinity. So he actually prohibited us from doing that. But we believe that God is infinite, which means that there couldn't be any time for an infinite being. I mean, the fact that we can understand the concept of infinity is quite stunning, that God's given us the capacity to understand something that has no limit. But we don't accept actual infinity like some of the modern mathematicians, which would create logical inconsistencies, like the part being greater than the whole. So we believe that God is the creator of time, that God cannot be he cannot be contained by time. So time-space is a pure creation, and we're in it. And then there is an idea that we move out of time. So the last day is called the last day because there's no more reckoning of time.
And after that, we move into God's sort of sphere of dimensional world.
There's an understanding in our tradition, and the Latin scholastics have it, and I don't know if they got it from the Muslims. I have a suspicion that they did, but I might be wrong. And that's in the Latin tradition, they call it the nunc stans, the idea of the eternal now. In our tradition, it's called ad-daim, al-an ad-daim, which means exactly the same thing, the eternal now. So God said, do not curse time, because I am time. In my hand is the night and the day. And the idea is, the dahar there is defined as the eternal now. God is not time in our concept of time.
Okay, the eternal now is a very powerful concept.
Right.
Now, in the Christian scholasticism, and some modern believers say, if you say that God is not in time, there are other attributes of God that has to come along with that, and that God can't change, that God is impassible, that nothing can have an impact on God, which seems to undermine intercessionary prayer. I mean, they get into a lot of complexities of God is out of time.
Right. Well, we believe that God is, we're not process theologians. God is God. And in the end of the day, that's why we put our head on the ground. There's a kind of submission at a certain point of the intellect, just to say that this is beyond my, it's beyond my pay grade, but it's not beyond my pray grade.
Oh, okay, that's nice phrase. But then, the intercessionary prayer, can God listen in time? And
Ibn Ata'illah, one of the great Egyptians, said that prayer was solely for a display of utter submission before God. But the Quran and the Hadith indicate that God does answer prayers. So that's the normative position, that God will answer prayers. But obviously, the knowledge of God is absolute. It's not that. There's this idea of aforeknowledge of God is already presupposing time. So if God is just eternal and God's knowledge is absolute, there's no past or present. There's just pure knowledge. And so God can answer the prayers. It's not a problem for me.